Maria Gonzalez stood at 5 feet 2 inches tall with hands that barely spanned 7 inches from thumb to pinky. At 19 years old, she possessed the kind of delicate features that made people underestimate her strength and determination. Her grandmother often said her hands were made for piano keys, not gun barrels. But Maria had different plans for her life. The military recruitment office in downtown San Antonio buzzed with activity on that humid Tuesday morning in March. Young men and women filled out paperwork, their faces showing mixtures of excitement and nervousness about their future service. Maria sat quietly in the corner, her small hands carefully filling out each line of her enlistment forms. She had dreamed of military service since childhood, inspired by stories her grandfather told about his time in the Navy during World War II. Sergeant Williams, a gruff man with 20 years of service under his belt, called her name. He looked down at her petite frame and shook his head slightly. "You sure about this, miss? Military life ain't easy, especially for someone your size." Maria met his gaze steadily. "I'm sure, Sergeant. I want to serve my country." The aptitude tests came naturally to her. Mathematics, mechanical reasoning, and spatial awareness scores placed her in the top 5% of all recruits. Her physical fitness test results, while meeting minimum standards, didn't impress anyone. Still, something about her quiet determination caught the attention of her recruiters. They offered her a position in the Navy's Weapons Systems program, a technical field that required precision and attention to detail rather than brute strength. Boot camp at Naval Station Great Lakes tested every recruit's limits. Maria found herself surrounded by men and women who towered over her, their voices booming across the training grounds while hers often got lost in the crowd. The drill instructors seemed to take special pleasure in pointing out her physical limitations. "Gonzalez, your rifle's bigger than you are," Petty Officer Martinez would shout during weapons training. "How you going to handle that thing in combat?" Despite the constant criticism, Maria excelled in classroom instruction. Weapons systems theory, ballistics calculations, and mechanical engineering principles came easily to her analytical mind. She spent extra hours in the study hall, memorizing every component of the M16 rifle, the M240 machine gun, and various pistol systems. Her classmates often found her late at night, surrounded by technical manuals and disassembled weapon parts. The real challenge came during hands-on training. The standard issue M16 felt heavy in her small hands, and the kick from firing it left bruises on her shoulder for weeks. Other recruits completed field stripping exercises in under 2 minutes while Maria struggled to reach the 4-minute mark. Her fingers, though nimble, had to work harder to grip and manipulate the weapon's components. One particularly difficult morning, the recruits faced a surprise inspection by Admiral Richardson, a decorated Vietnam veteran known throughout the Navy for his demanding standards and sharp tongue. The Admiral stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, his presence commanding immediate respect from everyone in the room. His steel-gray eyes scanned the assembled recruits as Petty Officer Martinez called them to attention. Admiral Richardson began his inspection, moving methodically down the line of recruits. He examined their uniforms, checked their knowledge of naval procedures, and tested their weapon handling skills. When he reached Maria, he paused. His eyes took in her small stature and delicate hands holding the massive rifle. "What's your name, sailor?" he asked in a voice that carried across the entire training bay. "Seaman Recruit Gonzalez, sir," Maria responded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The Admiral picked up her rifle and examined it closely. "This weapon is clean and properly maintained," he acknowledged. "But tell me, Gonzalez, how do you expect to handle this rifle effectively in combat with those tiny hands? They look like they belong on a pianist, not a sailor." Murmurs rippled through the assembled recruits. Maria felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she maintained her military bearing. "Sir, I believe proper technique and training matter more than hand size, sir." Admiral Richardson's eyebrows raised slightly. "Is that so? Well, let's see how your technique measures up." He handed the rifle back to her. "Field strip this weapon for me, Gonzalez. Let's see those piano fingers in action." Maria accepted the rifle and began the disassembly process. Her movements were careful and deliberate, each action performed with precision despite the tremor she felt in her hands. The Admiral watched closely, occasionally making comments about her speed or method. Other instructors gathered around to watch the impromptu demonstration. As Maria worked, the Admiral continued his commentary. "Notice how she has to adjust her grip constantly," he said to the assembled instructors. "Those small hands are a liability in high-stress situations. Combat doesn't wait for delicate adjustments." His words stung, but Maria continued her work, removing the bolt carrier group and other components with methodical precision. When she finished reassembling the weapon, Admiral Richardson checked her work. The rifle functioned perfectly, but her time was well above the standard requirement. "Adequate work, Gonzalez," he said dismissively, "but speed kills in combat. Your small hands put you and your shipmates at risk." The Admiral moved on to inspect other recruits, but his words echoed in Maria's mind for the rest of the day. That evening, she sat alone in the barracks, staring at her hands and wondering if she had made a mistake joining the Navy. Her bunkmate, Sarah Chun, a tall woman from California, tried to offer encouragement. "Don't let him get to you," Sarah said quietly. "You're one of the smartest people in our class. You know these weapons better than anyone." Maria appreciated the support, but doubt continued to gnaw at her confidence. She thought about her grandfather's stories of naval battles, where quick weapon maintenance could mean the difference between life and death. Had she been foolish to think her small hands wouldn't be a limitation? That night, unable to sleep, Maria made her way to the weapons training facility. The building was empty except for a lone security guard who knew her as one of the dedicated students who often stayed late to practice. She gathered several disassembled rifles and began working with them in the dim light. Hour after hour, she practiced the field stripping procedure. Her movements became more fluid, her fingers finding efficient paths to each component. She discovered that her smaller hands could actually access certain parts more easily than larger hands could. The trigger group, in particular, responded well to her delicate touch when cleaning and adjusting the mechanism. As dawn approached, Maria had achieved something remarkable. Her field stripping time had dropped from 4 minutes to just over 90 seconds. More importantly, she had developed techniques that worked specifically for someone with her hand size. Instead of fighting her physical limitations, she had learned to use them as advantages. The next day's training proceeded normally, with no sign that Admiral Richardson would return for another inspection. Maria participated in all exercises with renewed confidence, her improved technique clearly visible to the instructors. Petty Officer Martinez noticed her progress and offered grudging acknowledgement of her improvement. "Better work yesterday, Gonzalez," he said after a successful field stripping exercise. "Keep practicing, and you might actually make a sailor yet." Maria nodded respectfully, but privately she knew she had already proven something to herself. The Admiral's criticism had hurt, but it had also motivated her to push beyond what anyone thought possible. She began helping other recruits with their weapon maintenance, sharing techniques that worked for different hand sizes and grip strengths. Word of her teaching abilities spread among the recruits. Soon, Maria found herself leading informal study sessions in the evenings, breaking down complex weapon systems into understandable components. Her patient explanations and practical demonstrations helped several struggling recruits pass their qualification exams. The transformation didn't go unnoticed by the training staff. Chief Petty Officer Thompson, the senior weapons instructor, observed one of Maria's impromptu teaching sessions. He watched as she helped a large recruit from Texas understand the proper grip technique for his massive hands, then immediately shifted to show a smaller recruit from Maine how to leverage her compact frame for better stability. "Gonzalez," Chief Thompson called after the session ended. "A word." Maria approached the senior instructor nervously, wondering if she had violated some regulation by organizing the study groups. Chief Thompson's expression was unreadable as he studied her for a long moment. "I've been watching your progress," he said finally. "Your improvement over the past few weeks has been remarkable. More importantly, I've seen how you've helped other recruits improve their performance." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "How would you feel about demonstrating some of your techniques to the next class of recruits?" The opportunity excited Maria, but she remembered Admiral Richardson's harsh words. "Chief, do you think someone with my limitations should be teaching others?" Chief Thompson's stern expression softened slightly. "Gonzalez, I've been training sailors for 15 years. Some of the best marksmen and weapons experts I've known weren't the biggest or strongest people in their class. They were the ones who understood that technique and knowledge could overcome physical limitations. That weekend, Maria called her grandmother to share news of her progress. The elderly woman listened with pride as Maria described her challenges and achievements. Mija, her grandmother said in her gentle Spanish accent, "Your grandfather always said the smallest key can open the biggest door. You just have to know how to use it." Monday morning brought news that Admiral Richardson would be returning for a final inspection of the graduating recruit class. The announcement sent waves of nervousness through the barracks as everyone prepared for the Admiral's demanding examination. Maria felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach as she remembered their previous encounter. This time, however, she was ready for whatever challenges the Admiral might present. Her weeks of intensive practice had transformed her weapon-handling abilities beyond anything she had thought possible. More importantly, she had gained confidence in her unique approach to solving problems that others might see as insurmountable. As the recruits prepared their gear for inspection, Maria carefully cleaned and checked every component of her assigned rifle. Her hands, those same small hands that Admiral Richardson had mocked, moved with practiced efficiency across the weapon's surface. She had learned to see them not as limitations, but as precision instruments perfectly suited for detailed mechanical work. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything Maria had learned about herself and her capabilities. Admiral Richardson's return would provide the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that determination and skill could overcome any perceived disadvantage. The young woman who had once doubted her place in the military was ready to prove that heroes come in all sizes. Admiral Richardson arrived at Naval Station Great Lakes on a crisp Thursday morning, his staff car pulling up to the training facility exactly at 0800 hours. Word of his visit had spread quickly through the base, creating an atmosphere of heightened tension among both recruits and instructors. This would be his final evaluation of the current recruit class before their graduation and assignment to active duty positions throughout the fleet. Maria spent the early morning hours in final preparation, checking and rechecking every aspect of her uniform and equipment. Her rifle gleamed from meticulous cleaning, each component examined under the bright fluorescent lights of the barracks. She had risen at 0430, 2 hours before reveille, to ensure everything met the Admiral's exacting standards. The past month had transformed Maria in ways that extended far beyond her weapon-handling skills. Her confidence had grown steadily as she mastered increasingly complex mechanical challenges. Chief Thompson had assigned her additional responsibilities, including maintaining the training facility's demonstration weapons and assisting with equipment inventories. These duties provided valuable hands-on experience with weapon systems beyond the standard-issue rifles. Her fellow recruits had begun seeking her advice on technical problems that stumped their larger, stronger classmates. Just the previous week, she had helped David Martinez, a former college football player from Arizona, diagnose a persistent malfunction in his rifle's gas system. The problem had frustrated him for days, but Maria's detailed knowledge of the weapon's mechanics allowed her to identify a tiny piece of debris blocking a critical passage. "How did you even see that?" David had asked in amazement as Maria used a thin cleaning rod to extract the nearly invisible obstruction. "Small fingers can reach places others can't," she had replied with a smile, remembering Admiral Richardson's cutting remarks about her hand size. Chief Thompson had observed this interaction and many others like it. He began documenting Maria's technical aptitude and leadership qualities in her performance evaluations. Her ability to break down complex mechanical concepts into simple, understandable explanations impressed both instructors and recruits alike. When Admiral Richardson entered the training facility, the assembled recruits snapped to attention with parade ground precision. His uniform displayed rows of ribbons and decorations accumulated over 30 years of distinguished service. The Admiral's reputation preceded him throughout the Navy as an officer who demanded excellence and had little patience for excuses or mediocrity. "As you were," the Admiral commanded, and the recruits relaxed slightly while maintaining their military bearing. His steel-gray eyes swept across the formation, taking in every detail of their appearance and equipment. Several junior officers accompanied him, including Captain Morrison, the base commander, and Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the training officer. Admiral Richardson began his inspection methodically, stopping at each recruit to examine their weapon and quiz them on various technical subjects. His questions ranged from basic safety procedures to complex ballistics calculations that tested the limits of their classroom knowledge. Some recruits answered confidently, while others stumbled through their responses under his intimidating gaze. When the Admiral reached Thomas Bradley, a recruit from Montana who stood 6 feet 6 inches tall, he seemed particularly impressed by the young man's bearing and knowledge. "Outstanding work, Bradley," the Admiral commented after reviewing his perfectly maintained rifle. "Your size and strength will serve you well aboard ship." The compliment highlighted the contrast with his earlier assessment of Maria, creating an uncomfortable reminder of the prejudices she faced. Her position in the formation meant the Admiral would reach her near the end of his inspection, giving her time to observe his methods and prepare for his questions. As he moved down the line, Admiral Richardson engaged several recruits in technical discussions about weapon modifications and maintenance procedures. His questions revealed an encyclopedic knowledge of military firearms that impressed even the training staff. It became clear that his harsh criticism of Maria weeks earlier had been based on genuine concerns about combat effectiveness rather than mere prejudice. Lieutenant Commander Hayes whispered updates in the Admiral's ear as they progressed through the inspection. The reports included performance statistics and training achievements for each recruit, providing context for the Admiral's evaluations. Maria wondered what her file contained and whether her recent improvements had been properly documented. Petty Officer Martinez stood at attention nearby, ready to answer any questions about the training program. His earlier skepticism about Maria's capabilities had gradually shifted to grudging respect as he witnessed her dedication and progress. The gruff instructor had even begun using her techniques in his demonstrations to other classes. "Sir," Martinez interjected during a brief pause in the inspection, "if I may point out, several recruits in this class have shown exceptional mechanical aptitude. Their innovations in maintenance procedures have improved overall performance metrics across the board." Admiral Richardson raised an eyebrow at this unsolicited comment. "Innovations? In basic weapon maintenance? Explain yourself, Petty Officer." Martinez glanced briefly in Maria's direction before responding. "Some recruits have developed alternative techniques that work better for different physical builds, sir. These methods have proven effective in reducing maintenance time and improving reliability." The Admiral's interest was clearly piqued, though his expression remained stern. "I'll be the judge of any innovations, Petty Officer. Continue with the inspection." When Admiral Richardson finally reached Maria's position, she felt the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. He examined her uniform with the same methodical attention he had given every other recruit, finding no fault with her appearance or bearing. Her rifle received similar scrutiny, the Admiral checking every surface and mechanism with practiced efficiency. "Gonzalez," he said, recognizing her from their previous encounter. "I remember you." The recruit with the piano player hands. His tone carried no warmth, but neither did it contain the dismissive mockery of their first meeting. "Let's see if you've made any progress since our last conversation." Maria handed him her rifle for inspection, maintaining eye contact despite her nervousness. The Admiral examined the weapon thoroughly, testing the action and checking the barrel for cleanliness. His inspection was more detailed than those he had performed on other rifles, searching for any flaw that might justify his earlier criticism. "Weapon appears to be in excellent condition," he admitted grudgingly. "Now let's test your field stripping speed. I recall you were somewhat slow during our previous demonstration." The challenge was issued in a voice that carried across the entire training bay. Other recruits and instructors turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Chief Thompson stepped forward with a stopwatch, ready to time Maria's performance officially. Maria accepted the rifle and took a deep breath to calm her nerves. The weeks of intensive practice had prepared her for this moment, but performing under the Admiral's critical gaze presented a new level of pressure. She positioned herself at the designated workstation and waited for the command to begin. "Execute," Admiral Richardson ordered, and Maria's hands sprang into action. Her movements were fluid and precise, each motion economical and purposeful. The rifle came apart with mechanical efficiency as her small fingers manipulated components with surgical precision. The bolt carrier group, trigger assembly, and other parts were removed and arranged in perfect order on the work surface. Chief Thompson watched the stopwatch with growing amazement as Maria's time approached record-breaking territory. Her reassembly was equally impressive, each component sliding into place with the confidence that came from countless hours of practice. The final function check confirmed that every part had been properly installed. Time. Chief Thompson called out, his voice reflecting genuine surprise. 87 seconds, sir. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the assembled group. The standard time for this exercise was 2 minutes, and Maria had beaten it by over 30 seconds. Even Admiral Richardson seemed momentarily taken aback by the impressive performance. Adequate improvement, the Admiral said finally, his tone giving away nothing of his thoughts. But speed alone doesn't prove combat effectiveness. Any recruit can memorize a procedure and execute it quickly under ideal conditions. Maria sensed that the Admiral was building toward a more challenging test, but she felt ready for whatever he might propose. Her confidence had grown steadily over the past month, built on a foundation of solid technical knowledge and practical experience. She had learned to trust her abilities despite the physical limitations others saw as insurmountable. Sir, she said respectfully, I understand that combat conditions present unique challenges. I've tried to prepare for various scenarios that might affect weapon maintenance in the field. Admiral Richardson's eyes narrowed slightly at her response. Have you indeed? Well then, let's make this more interesting. He turned to address the assembled group. Clear the work area. I want to create a more realistic training scenario. Chief Thompson and the other instructors quickly rearranged the training space, removing the organized workstation and replacing it with a simple blanket spread on the floor. The change eliminated the convenient tool rack and good lighting that had aided Maria's previous demonstration. Combat maintenance isn't performed on nice, clean tables with perfect lighting, Admiral Richardson explained to the watching recruits. Equipment breaks down in muddy trenches, on rolling ship decks, and in the middle of firefights. A truly competent sailor must be able to maintain their weapon under any conditions. He picked up a different rifle from the weapons rack, one that Maria had never worked on before. This weapon showed signs of heavy use, with worn surfaces and components that wouldn't move as smoothly as the carefully maintained training rifles. This rifle has seen actual combat deployment, the Admiral continued. The tolerances are different, the fit isn't perfect, and some parts are genuinely difficult to manipulate. Field stripped this weapon in under 2 minutes, and perhaps I'll reconsider my assessment of your capabilities. Maria accepted the worn rifle and immediately noticed the differences the Admiral had mentioned. The charging handle required more force to operate, and the handguards showed signs of heat damage that had slightly warped their shape. This would be a true test of her adaptability and technical skill. She knelt on the blanket and began her examination of the unfamiliar weapon. Her fingers explored the rifle's surfaces, noting where patterns indicated potential problem areas. The bolt didn't cycle as smoothly as she was accustomed to, and the trigger group felt different from the standard training weapons. 60 seconds, Admiral Richardson announced, adding time pressure to the already challenging scenario. Remember, in combat, your shipmates' lives may depend on your ability to get this weapon back into action quickly. The psychological pressure was intense, but Maria forced herself to focus on the mechanical challenge before her. Her training had taught her that panic was the enemy of precision, and this situation demanded both speed and accuracy. She began the disassembly process, adapting her techniques to accommodate the weapon's individual characteristics. The worn components required different handling than she was accustomed to, but her fundamental understanding of the rifle's mechanics allowed her to adjust her approach accordingly. Her small hands proved advantageous when working around the warped handguards, allowing her to access areas that might have challenged someone with larger fingers. As she worked, Admiral Richardson provided running commentary on the challenges she faced. Notice how the bolt carrier group is sticking, he observed to the watching audience. That's carbon buildup from extended firing. In combat, you don't have the luxury of perfect maintenance schedules. Despite the additional obstacles, Maria's time remained competitive. Her movements stayed smooth and controlled even as she encountered unexpected resistance from various components. The months of practice had given her confidence in her ability to troubleshoot mechanical problems on the fly. The reassembly process presented its own challenges as the worn parts didn't fit together with the precision of newer weapons. Maria had to make subtle adjustments to her technique, using slightly different pressure and positioning to ensure proper alignment of the components. When she completed the final function check, Chief Thompson called out her time. 1 minute, 52 seconds, sir. Well within the required standard. Admiral Richardson examined the reassembled rifle carefully, testing the action and checking that all components had been properly installed. His inspection was thorough, searching for any errors that might have resulted from the challenging conditions. Acceptable work, he admitted, though his tone remained guarded. You've clearly put considerable effort into improving your skills. He paused, studying Maria with an expression that seemed to be reassessing his initial judgment. However, I have one final test that will truly demonstrate whether those small hands are an asset or a liability. The training bay fell silent as everyone waited to learn what challenge the Admiral would present next. Maria felt both nervous anticipation and growing confidence as she prepared for whatever test might come. She had already exceeded the Admiral's expectations twice, proving that determination and skill could overcome physical limitations. The stage was set for a final demonstration that would settle the question of whether Maria's unique abilities made her a valuable asset to the Navy or a potential liability to her future shipmates. Admiral Richardson reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew a black cloth blindfold, the same type used in advanced combat training exercises. The sight of it sent a ripple of anxiety through the assembled recruits, as none of them had ever attempted weapon maintenance without the aid of sight. This was clearly beyond standard training requirements, entering the realm of specialized skills reserved for elite military units. In naval combat, sailors often work in complete darkness. The Admiral began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had experienced such conditions firsthand. Engine rooms during battle damage control, below-deck compartments with failed lighting systems, night operations under blackout conditions. A truly competent sailor must be able to maintain their weapon by touch alone. Maria felt her heart rate increase as she realized the magnitude of the challenge being presented. She had never attempted blind field stripping, though she had occasionally practiced with her eyes closed during late-night training sessions. The technique required a level of mechanical familiarity that went far beyond simple memorization of procedures. Chief Thompson stepped forward with obvious concern. Sir, with respect, blind field stripping isn't part of our standard curriculum. The recruits haven't been trained for this type of exercise. Admiral Richardson's gaze remained fixed on Maria as he responded to the chief's objection. Standard training produces standard sailors, Chief. Exceptional circumstances require exceptional skills. If Gonzalez claims her small hands are an advantage rather than a limitation, let's put that theory to the ultimate test. The challenge was clearly personal, stemming from their previous encounters and the Admiral's skepticism about Maria's place in the Navy. She understood that this moment would likely define her military career, determining whether she would be viewed as a capable sailor or relegated to administrative duties far from any combat assignment. Sir, Maria said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, I accept your challenge. However, I request permission to examine the weapon briefly before being blindfolded, so I can familiarize myself with any unique characteristics it might possess. Admiral Richardson considered her request for a moment before nodding his approval. Reasonable. You have 2 minutes to examine the weapon. Use them wisely. He handed her his personal sidearm, a pristine M9 Beretta that showed signs of meticulous care and maintenance. The pistol was clearly a prized possession, probably carried throughout his long military career. The weight and balance felt different from the training weapons Maria was accustomed to, requiring immediate adjustment to her handling technique. Her small hands moved quickly over the weapon's surfaces, memorizing the location of every control and identifying anywhere patterns that might affect its disassembly. The pistol's finish was smoother than standard-issue weapons, and several components showed the kind of custom modifications that senior officers sometimes made to their personal equipment. This appears to be a customized weapon, sir, Maria observed as she continued her examination. The trigger has been modified, and the grips are non-standard. These changes will affect the disassembly procedure. Correct. Admiral Richardson acknowledged with what might have been the first hint of approval in his voice. Those modifications were made by a gunsmith in Naples during my Mediterranean deployment. They improve accuracy and handling but require adjusted maintenance techniques. Maria nodded as she completed her examination, committing every detail to memory. The 2-minute inspection period had given her valuable information about the weapon's unique characteristics, but she knew that working without sight would present entirely different challenges. Her small hands would need to compensate for the loss of visual guidance through enhanced sensitivity and spatial awareness. Time, Admiral Richardson announced, and Maria reluctantly handed back the pistol. Chief Thompson approached with the blindfold, his expression showing concern for what he clearly considered an unfair test. The assembled recruits watched in tense silence as the black cloth was secured over Maria's eyes, eliminating all visual input. The sudden darkness was disorienting, forcing Maria to rely entirely on her other senses to maintain spatial awareness. She could hear the subtle sounds of the training facility, feel the slight air movement from the ventilation system, and sense the presence of the watching crowd around her. Her hands felt strangely disconnected without visual confirmation of their movements. "The weapon is on the table in front of you," Admiral Richardson announced. "You have 3 minutes to completely field strip the pistol and reassemble it. Any errors in procedure or component placement will result in failure." Maria reached forward carefully until her fingertips contacted the smooth metal surface of the Beretta. The familiar weight and texture helped orient her to the weapon's position on the table. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves and began the mental process of visualizing each step of the disassembly procedure. Her first challenge came immediately as she attempted to locate the slide release lever. Without visual reference, her fingers had to search for the small control, using muscle memory and spatial relationships to guide her movements. The customized grips made the weapon feel slightly different than she had expected, requiring subtle adjustments to her hand positioning. 40 seconds elapsed. Chief Thompson called out, his voice betraying anxiety about her slow start. The time pressure added another layer of stress to an already challenging situation. Maria forced herself to ignore the countdown and focus on the mechanical task before her. Her fingers found the slide release and manipulated it with careful precision, feeling the slight vibration as the slide moved forward into the locked position. Each movement was deliberate and controlled, avoiding the rushed actions that might lead to mistakes. The magazine release required similar careful manipulation, her fingertip locating the small button and applying just enough pressure to disengage the mechanism. Without sight, she had to rely entirely on the tactile feedback of the weapon's response to confirm that each step had been completed successfully. 1 minute 30 seconds came the next time update, and Maria realized she was falling behind the pace she would need to complete the challenge successfully. The pressure was building, but she maintained her systematic approach to the disassembly process. Her small hands proved advantageous when reaching into the pistol's frame to manipulate internal components. The trigger group required delicate handling to avoid damage to the firing mechanism, and her precise finger control allowed her to work within the confined space of the weapon's interior. The slide disassembly presented the greatest challenge, as the recoil spring and barrel required careful coordination to remove safely. Without visual guidance, Maria had to rely on her understanding of the weapon's mechanical relationships to guide each movement. Her fingers traced the contours of the components, using their shape and texture to confirm proper positioning. 2 minutes, Chief Thompson announced, and Maria could hear the tension in his voice. She was approaching the halfway point of the allotted time with only partial disassembly completed. The watching crowd had fallen completely silent, creating an almost oppressive atmosphere of expectation. Maria could sense Admiral Richardson's presence nearby, probably observing every movement with critical attention. The knowledge that her entire military future might depend on the next few minutes added enormous psychological pressure to the physical challenge. Her fingers worked with increasing confidence as muscle memory took over from conscious thought. Each component came apart with mechanical precision, her hands moving through the familiar motions despite the absence of visual confirmation. The countless hours of practice had created neural pathways that functioned independently of sight. The pistol's customized features created occasional moments of confusion as her fingers encountered unexpected surfaces or modifications. However, her initial examination had prepared her for these variations, allowing her to adapt her technique accordingly. The non-standard grips required different hand positioning, but her small fingers were able to work around the obstacles. 2 minutes 30 seconds came the next update, and Maria realized she needed to begin the reassembly process immediately to have any chance of completing the challenge successfully. Her hands moved quickly but carefully as she began the reverse process of putting the weapon back together. The recoil spring and barrel assembly required particularly delicate handling during reinstallation. Without sight, Maria had to rely on the subtle resistance and alignment cues that indicated proper positioning of the components. Her small hands proved perfectly suited for the precision work required to navigate the tight tolerances of the weapon's interior. Each component clicked into place with satisfying precision as her fingers guided them through the complex mechanical relationships. The trigger group reinstalled smoothly, followed by the magazine release mechanism and other internal parts. Her movements became more fluid as confidence returned. 40 seconds remaining, Chief Thompson called out, and Maria realized she was approaching the critical final phase of the challenge. The slide reinstallation would determine whether she could complete the task within the allotted time. Her hands positioned the slide carefully on the pistol's frame, feeling for the proper alignment of the guide rails that would allow smooth operation. The customized weapon required slight adjustments to her standard technique, but her initial examination had provided the necessary information to make these adaptations. The final function check could only be performed by feel, testing the trigger action and slide movement to ensure proper assembly. Each mechanism responded correctly to her manipulation, confirming that the reassembly had been completed successfully. The weapon felt exactly as it had at the beginning of the exercise. Time. Admiral Richardson called out just as Maria completed the final verification of the weapon's function. The timing was incredibly close, but she had apparently finished within the required 3 minutes. Chief Thompson immediately approached to remove the blindfold, and Maria blinked as her eyes adjusted to the sudden return of light. The training facility looked exactly as it had before, but her perception of her own capabilities had been fundamentally changed by the challenging exercise. Admiral Richardson picked up his pistol and began a thorough examination of her work. His inspection was even more detailed than his previous evaluations, checking every component and mechanism for proper installation and function. The watching crowd remained silent as they awaited his verdict on the unprecedented demonstration. The Admiral's expression was unreadable as he continued his inspection, testing the weapon's action and examining each surface for any signs of improper assembly. Maria watched nervously, knowing that even a small error could invalidate her impressive performance and confirm his initial doubts about her capabilities. Finally, Admiral Richardson looked up from his examination, his steel-gray eyes meeting Maria's gaze directly. The moment stretched uncomfortably as he seemed to consider not just her technical performance, but the broader implications of what he had witnessed. Weapon properly disassembled and reassembled, he announced to the assembled group. All components correctly installed, all functions operating normally. He paused, his expression still revealing nothing of his thoughts. Time completion, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. A collective exhale seemed to escape from the watching crowd as they realized Maria had not only completed the impossible challenge but had done so with mere seconds to spare. The demonstration had exceeded even the most optimistic expectations of her supporters among the training staff. However, Admiral Richardson's tone remained neutral as he continued his evaluation. This concludes the technical portion of the assessment. I will now provide my final evaluation of Seaman Recruit Gonzalez's capabilities and recommendations for her future assignments. The moment of truth had arrived, and Maria prepared herself for whatever judgment the Admiral might render on her military future. Admiral Richardson holstered his pistol and took a step back, his penetrating gaze sweeping across the assembled recruits before settling once again on Maria. The training facility remained unnaturally quiet, with even the background noise of the base seemingly muted by the tension of the moment. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in the standard recruit training program. Ladies and gentlemen, the Admiral began, his voice carrying clearly across the training bay. What you have just witnessed represents more than simple technical proficiency. It demonstrates the kind of adaptability and determination that distinguishes exceptional sailors from merely adequate ones. Maria felt her heart racing as she tried to interpret the Admiral's words. His tone had shifted from the harsh criticism of their previous encounters, but she couldn't yet determine whether his assessment would be positive or negative. The blindfolded demonstration had pushed her beyond any training she had previously experienced. When I first met Seaman Recruit Gonzalez several weeks ago, the Admiral continued, I expressed concerns about her physical limitations and their potential impact on combat effectiveness. Those concerns were based on legitimate observations about the demands of naval service and the life-or-death nature of weapon maintenance in hostile environments. Chief Thompson and the other instructors listened intently, recognizing that the Admiral's words would likely influence Maria's career trajectory for years to come. A negative evaluation from an officer of his stature could effectively end her hopes for assignment to any combat-related position in the fleet. However, Admiral Richardson said, pausing dramatically as he glanced around the room, I have learned today that my initial assessment was fundamentally flawed. Not because I was wrong about the physical demands of military service, but because I failed to recognize that exceptional individuals find ways to transcend apparent limitations through dedication, intelligence, and innovative thinking. A subtle shift in the room's atmosphere suggested that the Admiral's evaluation might be more favorable than anyone had dared hope. Maria felt cautiously optimistic, but remained focused on his words, knowing that military assessments often contained unexpected reversals. Seaman Recruit Gonzalez has just demonstrated capabilities that exceed those of many experienced sailors, the Admiral stated flatly. Her blind field-stripping performance was not merely adequate, it was exceptional by any standard. More importantly, her approach to overcoming physical challenges shows exactly the kind of problem-solving ability we need in our modern Navy. The Admiral turned to address Chief Thompson directly. Chief, I want you to document this demonstration in Recruit Gonzalez's permanent record. Include my personal recommendation that she be considered for advanced weapons training programs upon completion of basic instruction. Chief Thompson's face showed genuine surprise at this development. Advanced weapons training was typically reserved for recruits who had demonstrated exceptional aptitude across multiple areas of military instruction. The recommendation coming from Admiral Richardson carried enormous weight within the Navy's personnel system. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, I'm recommending that the techniques Recruit Gonzalez has developed be incorporated into our standard training curriculum. Her innovations in accommodating different physical builds could benefit sailors throughout the fleet. This statement created visible excitement among the watching instructors, who recognized the significance of having their training methods influenced by feedback from such a senior officer. Petty Officer Martinez looked particularly pleased, having observed Maria's progress from the beginning of her training cycle. Maria struggled to process the dramatic reversal in her circumstances. The same officer who had publicly questioned her suitability for military service was now praising her abilities and recommending her for advanced training opportunities. The transformation seemed almost surreal after weeks of doubt and intensive preparation. Sir, Maria said, finding her voice after several moments of stunned silence. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to prove myself. I hope to continue serving with distinction wherever the Navy assigns me. Admiral Richardson studied her for a moment before responding. Gonzalez, the Navy didn't give you this opportunity. You created it through your own efforts. What I witnessed today wasn't the result of special treatment or lowered standards. You exceeded the same requirements that apply to every sailor, using methods that may actually be superior to conventional techniques. He turned to address the entire group of recruits. Let this be a lesson to all of you about the dangers of making assumptions based on superficial observations. Military effectiveness depends on results, not appearances. The sailor standing next to you in combat may look different from what you expect, but their ability to perform under pressure is what will keep you alive. The Admiral's words carried particular weight coming from an officer with extensive combat experience. His decorated career included multiple deployments to hostile environments where weapon reliability had indeed been a matter of survival for him and his crew members. Chief Thompson, Admiral Richardson continued, I want regular progress reports on Recruit Gonzalez's advancement through the remaining phases of her training. If her performance continues at this level, I may have specific assignment recommendations when she completes the program. This statement sent a thrill of excitement through Maria as she realized the Admiral was taking a personal interest in her career development. Such attention from a senior officer was extremely rare and could open doors to assignments and opportunities that might otherwise be unavailable to a new sailor. Captain Morrison, who had observed the entire demonstration in relative silence, stepped forward to add his own comments. Admiral Richardson, if I may, I think what we've seen here today reflects very well on the quality of training being provided at this facility. Our instructors have clearly done excellent work in developing innovative solutions to complex challenges. The base commander's words were carefully chosen to ensure that the training staff received appropriate recognition for their role in Maria's development. Military culture placed great emphasis on acknowledging the contributions of everyone involved in successful outcomes. Absolutely correct, Captain, Admiral Richardson agreed. The instruction provided here has enabled Recruit Gonzalez to reach her potential, which benefits both her and the Navy as a whole. This is exactly the kind of adaptive training we need to develop the sailors of the future. As the formal evaluation concluded, the atmosphere in the training facility shifted from tense anticipation to celebratory relief. The other recruits began congratulating Maria on her performance, their enthusiasm genuine and unrestrained. Even those who had initially been skeptical of her abilities seemed impressed by what they had witnessed. Sarah Chun, Maria's bunkmate from California, was among the first to offer congratulations. I knew you could do it, she said with obvious pride. You've been working toward this moment since the day we arrived here. David Martinez, the former football player whose rifle malfunction Maria had diagnosed, shook his head in amazement. I can't believe you did that blindfolded. I probably couldn't field strip my own weapon that fast with perfect lighting. The positive reactions from her fellow recruits meant almost as much to Maria as Admiral Richardson's official endorsement. These were the people she would potentially serve alongside in the fleet, and their acceptance was crucial for effective teamwork in military operations. Chief Thompson approached Maria as the crowd began to disperse. Congratulations, Gonzalez. You've earned every bit of recognition you received today. His gruff exterior couldn't hide the genuine pride in his voice. I've been training recruits for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like that demonstration. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the training officer, added his own perspective. What impressed me most was your composure under pressure. The blindfold exercise was far beyond anything in our curriculum, but you approached it with the same systematic methodology you use for standard procedures. These professional assessments from experienced military instructors provided valuable feedback on the qualities that had enabled Maria's success. Their observations would help her understand how to continue developing her capabilities in future assignments. As Admiral Richardson prepared to depart, he made one final stop to speak privately with Maria. Gonzalez, I owe you an apology for my initial assessment of your capabilities. I allowed preconceptions to cloud my judgment, which is a mistake I pride myself on avoiding. Maria was surprised by this admission from such a senior officer. Military culture typically discouraged acknowledgement of errors, particularly in front of junior personnel. The Admiral's willingness to admit his mistake demonstrated the strength of character that had enabled his successful career. Sir, no apology is necessary, Maria responded respectfully. Your challenging evaluation motivated me to push beyond what I thought was possible. Without that pressure, I might never have discovered these capabilities. Admiral Richardson smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Maria had seen from him. That's an admirably mature perspective, but I still should have recognized your potential from our first meeting. Experience should have taught me that determination often matters more than physical attributes. He handed her a business card with his contact information. When you complete your training here, contact my office. I may have some interesting assignment opportunities for someone with your unique skill set. The card represented a direct connection to one of the Navy's most influential officers, opening possibilities that most new sailors could only dream about. Maria carefully tucked it into her uniform pocket, understanding its potential value for her future career. As Admiral Richardson's staff car disappeared through the base gates, Maria reflected on the extraordinary events of the day. The morning had begun with anxiety about facing the officer who had previously questioned her suitability for military service. Now, hours later, she found herself with official recognition, advanced training recommendations, and personal mentorship from one of the Navy's most respected leaders. That evening, Maria called her grandmother to share the remarkable developments. The elderly woman listened with tears of joy as Maria described the day's events, from the challenging demonstrations to Admiral Richardson's complete reversal of his earlier assessment. Mija, her grandmother said in her gentle voice, "Your grandfather would be so proud. He always said the military would teach you to find strength you didn't know you had." The conversation reminded Maria of the family legacy that had inspired her decision to enlist. Her grandfather's stories of naval service during World War II had planted the seeds of her military ambitions, and now she was beginning to write her own chapter in that ongoing story. Over the following weeks, news of Maria's demonstration spread throughout the training facility and beyond. Other recruit classes asked to observe her teaching sessions, and several instructors requested copies of her modified maintenance procedures for evaluation by their own students. Chief Thompson formally submitted her techniques to the Navy's Training Command for possible incorporation into the official curriculum. The review process would take months, but the initial feedback suggested genuine interest in updating procedures that had remained largely unchanged for decades. Maria's remaining time in recruit training passed quickly, with each evaluation confirming Admiral Richardson's assessment of her exceptional capabilities. Her final graduation scores ranked her among the top 5% of her class, virtually guaranteeing access to the specialized training programs he had recommended. When graduation day arrived, Maria's family made the journey from Texas to witness her transformation from uncertain recruit to confident sailor. Her grandmother, despite her age and limited mobility, insisted on attending the ceremony to see her granddaughter receive her recognition. As Maria stood in formation with her fellow graduates, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The young woman who had once doubted whether her small hands could handle military equipment had become someone whose innovations might improve training for thousands of future sailors. Admiral Richardson's presence at the graduation ceremony provided a final validation of her achievements. As he shook her hand during the awards presentation, he offered one last piece of advice. "Remember, Gonzalez, that your real contribution to the Navy is just beginning. Use these experiences to help others overcome whatever limitations they think they face." Maria's story had become proof that determination and innovation could transform apparent disadvantages into unique strengths. The small hands that had once been mocked as unsuitable for military service had demonstrated capabilities that impressed even the most experienced officers in the fleet. Her future assignments would provide new opportunities to apply the lessons learned during her challenging journey from recruit to recognized expert. The Navy had gained not just another sailor, but someone whose unique perspective and proven abilities would contribute to the service's ongoing evolution and improvement. The Admiral who had once questioned her capabilities had become her strongest advocate, demonstrating that even the most experienced leaders could learn from those they initially underestimated. Maria's success represented a victory not just for her personally, but for the principle that excellence comes in many forms and should never be prejudged based on superficial characteristics. As she prepared to begin the next phase of her military career, Maria carried with her the confidence that comes from overcoming seemingly impossible challenges through persistence, creativity, and unwavering dedication to excellence.